Hear now these words from the prophet. Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord has risen upon you. For darkness shall cover the earth, and thick darkness the peoples. But the Lord will arise upon you, and his glory will appear over you. Nations shall come to your light, and kings to the brightness of your dawn. Lift up your eyes and look around. They all gather together, they come to you. Your sons shall come from far away, and your daughters shall be carried on their nurses' arms. Then you shall see and be radiant. Your heart shall thrill and rejoice, because the abundance of the sea shall be brought to you. The wealth of the nations shall come to you. A multitude of camels shall cover you. The young camels of Midian and Ephah, all those from Sheba shall come. They shall bring gold and frankincense and shall proclaim the praise of the Lord. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
Happy New Year, church. But is it? I mean, just because the calendar says it's the new year and we are programmed to wish each other a happy one, is there reason for hope that there is a brighter future ahead? We are nearing the 2-year mark of COVID, and the virus keeps adapting and we keep adjusting, right? Every day we learn of somebody else who is close to us, who comes down with it. And when we thought we were seeing light in the Delta darkness, the ominous Omicron darkness descended. So today is the Sunday we celebrate the light of Epiphany. Now, if you're a liturgical stickler, you know that Epiphany is not until Thursday. It's always January 6th, don't you know? But this Thursday will mark the 1-year anniversary of a dark and shameful day in our nation's history, when our capital was violently overrun by our own citizens. For my part, I refuse to let January 6th be defined by that. It's always been and always will be, for Christians, Epiphany. We will remember wise men following the light in the dark sky. We will celebrate Jesus as the light of the world. We will remember the words of the prophet Isaiah to a discouraged people, "Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord has risen upon you. For darkness shall cover the earth, and the thick darkness the peoples, but the Lord will arise upon you, and his glory will appear over you. Nations shall come to your light, and kings to the brightness of your dawn. Lift up your eyes and look around." Whew. Those were big, bold, brassy words to the people in Isaiah's time. They had returned from exile in Babylon to the homeland they had dreamed of and longed for. And what they found was a city in ruins, a temple in ruins, an economy in ruins. Darkness dominated everywhere they looked. And just then, into that moment of darkness, Isaiah points to the light and calls people to look up and take joy in it. We need to heed Isaiah's call today as we look about and feel the darkening power of the Omicron variant spreading swiftly everywhere and affecting everything. The most read article in the New York Times in 2021 was by Adam Grant back in April. It's titled Languishing. Grant talks about how psychologists rate our mental health on a continuum between depression and flourishing. Most of us don't live at these extremes. We are somewhere between them, and the more we are moving toward flourishing, the healthier we are. But COVID has exposed a lot of mental fatigue. That isn't exactly depression or hopelessness. It's more often joylessness or aimlessness. And the name he gives to that is languishing. I think it's related an awful lot to a word that sounds very much like it, anguishing. Languishing, Grant says, is a sense of stagnation and emptiness. It feels as if you're muddling through your days, looking at your life as if through a foggy windshield. Anyone here resemble that remark? I wonder, though, whether spiritually the problem isn't with the darkness without so much as the darkness within. I mean, darkness and light are always part of our life at the same time, and darkness can be a good teacher if we accept it without letting it dominate us. To a large degree, it's not the conditions of COVID so much as how we respond to them that makes all the difference. And sadly, some of our responses haven't been all that good. This has brought out the best in some people and the worst in some. There's an old rabbinic story about a 10-year-old boy who was studying the events of the Exodus from Torah. He was perplexed by the third plague that God had sent upon the Egyptians, that a darkness should cover the land. The boy wanted to know why the Egyptians didn't just light the lamps that they had so that they could see. After all, this is what they did every day when the sun went down and it was dark, they lit their lamps. Why, he wondered, when it became dark over all the land, didn't the Egyptians simply light their lamps? The teacher explained to the boy that the darkness in Egypt didn't affect the eyes. It affected the heart. Physically, the Egyptians could see, but in their hearts, they didn't recognize the misery their intolerance and persecution were causing other people. The Egyptians were blind to the suffering of others. This is what is meant by the plague of darkness. Now, I don't want to suggest to you that all of our anguishing and languishing comes from sinful disregard of others. Some of the darkness we experience indeed comes from the darkness that is without, that has encroached upon our souls to one degree or another. But I also don't want to disregard the fact that sinful disregard of others affects us too. When we think mostly about ourselves, that egoism crowds out the light that is within. You become someone who loses the attractive power of the light that is yours. Kim and I were in San Antonio for most of the past week with some of our kids and grandkids, and one night the adults stayed up to watch the new movie, Don't Look Up. I'll bet you figured I'd get to that. Star-studded cast, you can almost list by first names alone, right? Meryl, Leo, Jennifer, Tyler, Kate, Jonah. It's a satire, or at least I think it is, on the apocalyptic times we are living through when nature threatens us and how we react to it. The storyline involves a light that has been spotted in the sky, and it's not the Star of Bethlehem. It's a comet hurtling directly toward the earth. The scientists who discover it want to alert the world about it. But when they try to, the powers to be are so self-absorbed, so concerned about losing their own popularity, so uncaring about truth, that they tell people, don't look up. Right? Ironically, those who know the truth, because they have looked up and seen what is coming in the sky, tell everyone, look up. And what's curious about the end of the movie, and trust me, there's no spoiler because there's no real surprise in this movie, those who refuse to look up are the most anxious and unprepared because they care only for themselves. And those who do look up are able to look around and see each other because they can accept the coming calamity calmly. They have essentially heeded Isaiah's call to look up and see that the light of God is rising among them. And that's epitomized by one of the most beautiful prayers ever in film. And it's voiced by one of the least likely characters. Check it out. But to go back to that Times article, the recommendation Adam Grant makes for people to get out of the inner darkness of languishing, they are fine as far as they go. But while they are good, they are not God. And this is what is so often the missing component in our everyday lives. We may say we are believers, but we often behave as if a 0.5 milligram Xanax or a 5-mile run or a 5-minute romp are all we need. Something more is needed. Someone more. Isaiah told Israel that the light of God in all its brilliance and radiance had risen upon them in the face of the darkness all around. It came as a grace to them, not as an achievement by them, but it was also theirs. Listen again. Arise, shine, for your light has come. The glory of the Lord has risen upon you. Israel didn't have to rebuild the walls of the city first. They didn't have to rebuild the temple first. They didn't have to fix the economy first. They only needed to look up and embrace the light of God's glory within them and among them. They only needed to care for one another as a righteous community. Then the peoples of the earth would see their light and come to it. Then the wealth of the nations would come to them. And that is, by the way, part of what's fulfilled in the wise men bringing gold, frankincense, and myrrh. This is what I want to say to the church today, both the church in America generally and this church particularly. We don't need to fight a culture war against the darkness as if with lightsabers. We don't need to abandon the way of Jesus as if loving your enemies is weak and ineffective. Stunningly, that's just what one populist political figure claimed this week. He said the way of Jesus, things like turning the other cheek, hasn't worked out for Christians. We need to fight instead, he said. And I say, people, if we give up on the way of Jesus, we forfeit our Christian calling and become surrogates of the state instead of servants of God. We need to be the church of Jesus, shining the light of Christ into a darkened world. And if we do, and only if we do, the world will be drawn to our light and warmed by it. We don't need to bark at the world and give them orders as if we are all-knowing authorities on everything. My granddaughter Zetta's 10th birthday was Wednesday, so we all made her search for her presents that we had hidden around the house, and she was blindfolded. Her sisters were charged with giving her directions as she reached and tripped and fumbled around the house. Unfortunately for her sister, for Zetta, her sisters kept giving her non-directional directions, like, no, this way, or turn, or there. When she failed to heed their calls because she couldn't tell which way this way meant, she became frustrated, and so did the girls, and their response was just to yell louder. Until finally, Mother Cameron said, "Y'all, she's blind, not deaf." Friends, we need to proclaim the good news with humility and live it with grace. Then people will find their way to us. Then we will flourish and not languish. That is the promise of God. So don't lose heart, church, and don't lose faith. In this new year, let us be Epiphany people, hearing the word of Isaiah as if it is directed to us in our time. Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord has risen upon you. The future is bright, indeed. Amen.